Hi, I'm Batya Novick, founder of Cala Collective and a therapist specializing in reproductive mental health. And for those of you who are new to Cala Collective, we're a curated network of licensed therapists who specialize in reproductive mental health, dedicated to these complex experiences that we face throughout the process of family building. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to be speaking with Liz Krueger, who's been sharing her fertility story and her story of secondary infertility on social media and really helping so many people through these stories. This is Infertility Awareness Week, and Liz and I are going to deep dive into her story, into my role as a therapist in the fertility journey, and how the strength of our stories can truly make a difference in other people's lives. So, Liz, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you found yourself at the beginning of this story.
Yeah, so I reside in Minneapolis. I am a mother to a 4-year-old. I'm a wife to my husband, and I'm an event curator for Lulu Lemon. So I do cultural and events around well-being. Been doing that for 6 years. So that is my main roles. And then I also have a platform on social media that started as a fitness page and then kind of transformed into lifestyle and now heavily in the infertility, fertility um, realm, and really empowering women to own their stories and, you know, not have shame around their stories and really just build community in person and online so we can all feel a little bit less alone. And I had my daughter, who is 4, in 2020. 2 weeks into the pandemic, found out I was pregnant with her at 35. That was not on the vision board either, but it was it was wonderful. And then, after my appointment with my OB after her, she asked me if I was going to have more kids, and we said, yeah, we wanted to. And she said to me, hopefully you can, start trying sooner than later. I was a little offended at first, but now, I mean, I still go to her and I love her, but you never really want to believe what your truth could be when it comes to fertility. So we started trying. I got pregnant in 2022 naturally, and then I soon miscarried in 2023 in January. So then another woman who I'm an acquaintance with in Minneapolis was talking to me about IUI on Instagram, and she was like, "This just might be a good route for you. It's less expensive than IVF, and if you don't really know, I suggest going to get a workup done." And so I kind of did all those initial steps. Had a really high egg count number, AMH, for those who are in this. And so I was very hopeful that there was a solution for me. So we started IUI. I got pregnant through IUI, and then I miscarried again around 8 weeks. Um, if I get choked up today, sometimes these things just like come up. Um,
I mean, these stories
what
stay with us, don't they? I think that's so much of what we do is realizing that we can get beyond it, but the grief is still there. The scars remains.
Yes, and I feel like I don't talk about it in timelines very
Yeah.
much, and so they're all kind of their own individual experiences, and I've kind of just pressed on through this whole journey. So, yeah, so at that point, in the day I was in the ultrasound room, I was beside myself. I said, I cannot go through another loss. I don't want to do another round of IUI. We had talked about maybe doing 3 rounds before we started IVF, and I said, I just think IVF is the route for us. So, like many, the cost is expensive. So we had those meetings and thinking about, like, is this the route we want to go? Um, Thinking that it might be my egg quality. That was the route we decided to go. So that was I'm with a new clinic now. I'll get there, but this was with my past clinic. And I did IVF. I got pregnant via IVF, and it was amazing and wonderful. And then I miscarried at 16 weeks. So I went in for my 16-week appointment, and they could not find a heartbeat. Um, so that really was the day that kind of laid me out. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think I want to have any more children. I can't do this. I was beside myself. I said, I cannot go back to work. It was one of those moments where you just don't think it's your life, right? It was an appointment that my husband wasn't even going to, come with me
Right.
to, because I was
Just
like,
a
we're just going to.
regular appointment in your second trimester where you're really tucked into the pregnancy at this point.
Yes, and with IVF, I don't ever say these things to scare people, but it's just from my experience that it's a tested embryo. It's, there should be a cushion built in and all of that.
Right.
Um, I had to, choose if I wanted to give birth or if I wanted to have a surgery. I opted for surgery because I just wasn't mentally or emotionally in a place to give birth. But then we found out that it wasn't a genetic thing. It was a stricture in the umbilical cord. So it was
Mm.
nothing having to do with,
The
IVF. And
quality
I'm
of
not,
the embryo or the pregnancy.
yeah. So I was like, okay. So I actually took a mental health leave from work for 3 months. It was not the hardest decision I've ever made, but for somebody like me who's very driven and just, I've always, through all these losses, just gone back to work after surgery, or when you're bleeding, you're just like, you just keep going on with life. And this was like, no, I know I need to take time. I'm going to continue to do this. And at that moment, I didn't know if I was going to, but heal from all of these losses that I had, and it was just like a physical response to everything that my body had been through. What, the losses, the hormones, the appointments, the mental load, all of it, which was such. I mean, it was a short-term disability leave. I had to fight for it pretty hard. I was seeing a therapist. I was being supported by my OBGYN. I was actually put on Zoloft for the first time ever in my life because I was talking to her about what was happening, and she was just like, I think you might be anxious and depressed. And I was like, cool,
Yeah.
this is
Right.
happening. It was like, thank you for seeing me for, yeah. And all this to say, in all of this, before I got pregnant through IVF, I found out the day of that one of my embryos didn't make the thaw on the day that I was transferring. So that was a loss
Yeah.
in itself. And
Yeah.
then the embryo was implanted. And then this is something I, I can't talk about in detail publicly very much, but something very traumatic happened with our last embryo. And I found out through my own conversation with the clinic that this happened. And so it was a huge loss and a fight amongst after just miscarrying 3 weeks prior. So I was like in this fight mode. It was like I was on a leave, but I was fighting for myself, for my family, trying to heal, trying to figure out the path forward. And then my company started covering IVF on October 1st. It was like, so I was like, okay, I've met my out of pocket
Yeah.
for the year. I need to like continue doing this. This is,
Yeah.
a fighting, so there was just so much at this point. And this was just September of this past year. So I got right back into it in 2024 and literally got in December before they shut down the clinic for, cleaning and all of that. But I switched clinics. I found a new doctor. So I had to start over. I had to do all the paperwork. I had to do all the initial appointments all over again. Um, and yeah, so I've done now 2 retrievals. I just did my third transfer last week. So I'm in the
Waiting.
window of wait, the doom,
Yeah.
the doom. It's so
Yeah.
hard, but yeah. So it's been since 2022 that I've been on this secondary infertility journey, and I just find hope within every step. I feel like.
I mean, I think you're bringing up so many important and incredible points. I mean, first of all, just what women go through, even before there's a pregnancy, when you're doing fertility treatments, right? Like all the uncertainty with IUI, with IVF, all the steps, how much you have to be your own advocate through all of this. And that's even before you have to deal with a pregnancy and then all the losses you had. So, it's so much women have to carry when they're going through these supports medically. And yet you were also a mother, a professional. I mean, how did you balance all of this? How did you kind of focus on this and the other parts of your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like, I like, how am I still doing it?
Right. Let me think about that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I will say though, what has been the saving grace is that I have been so open about it. So I don't have to lie or pretend things aren't happening, which I think, people can be private about their situation. And to me, that's not natural. And it puts more of stress and a pressure on me. So people have always known where I'm at. So at least I can say, hey, this happened in my life. And people have shown me grace, have shown me so much support. Um, and I've just been very clear, like, I'm not having a good day, or I can't work, or, things like that. And just, I've had to draw some pretty strict boundaries in that sense, just to emotionally keep myself intact. Um, but I will say it's a combination of things. I've been doing weekly therapy. I am medicated currently, on a low dose of Zoloft.
Yeah.
I, have an amazing partner who I can, talk to about these things. I have amazing girlfriends. I have an online, community of IVF people. I use my workouts as emotional release. I've been doing infrared sauna. I've been, doing restorative yoga, and so it's like there has been a collect. I've gone on so many walks in nature. Just there's been so many tools that I've had to utilize, and it hasn't been just one thing because every day is so different. Um, but that has really kept me kind of on the straight and narrow. But I will say, before I took this time off from work, it was really hard because I felt like I was just constantly pushing through. And some days you feel like, how am I doing this? Or should I stop doing this? And with secondary infertility, people are like, well, why don't you just take a break? You have your daughter. She's perfect. She's wonderful. And I'm like, I know that. But I also have this dream. And as we know with fertility, the longer you wait, the harder things can get. And I just turned 40 in February. And so you do have those thoughts about, like, and it is the financial stuff. So it's like, if you have coverage or if you don't, it's like you have to plan around that accordingly. So there is, you have so little control in the process, but there also are some things that you want to control along the way to kind of keep yourself feeling intact, is how I like best I can describe it.
I think that's a great point, and something that as a therapist we often highlight is in a moment where you have such little control, it's so important to kind of identify those areas that you do. And I mean, you've done so much from seeking mental health support and medication support, which in and of itself, so few people do. They don't give themselves permission that this is big enough to have that support. And we see a lot in secondary infertility. People just really aren't giving permission to themselves to have a place in the fertility or infertility community because they have a child, when it's the same levels of grief and trauma and the same levels of stress and anxiety as anybody else going through this journey. And so just giving yourself that support, it's so helpful that you're sharing that, because I think so many people can benefit from that.
Yeah, and I know it's hard because I even was like, I can't believe I know people that have had second trimester miscarriages and they went back to work. Why am I not able to just go back to work? Or, why am I feeling this way when I see this other person, and it's like, what I've learned is that, like, even the layers of my experience are so different than somebody else's. And, my internal makeup is so different, and you can't compare. It's good to have that, like, solidarity, but also, maybe they didn't take care of themselves. Maybe they had to go back to work because they didn't have the option, maybe they, and I would hear these messages on Instagram DMs, like, I wish I would have done that, after even a second trimester miscarriage. They tell you can go back to work like 3 days later. And I'm like, this is so messed up. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
maybe physically, but
Right.
like, you are not okay after, especially with IVF. I feel like a pregnancy is, first trimester, second trimester, but when you've done IVF, it feels like you have this additional trimester before the first trimester. So you've been in it for so long that I'm like, I feel like I have been pregnant almost for a year or whatever, So even that is so different than somebody that might get pregnant naturally. And you just can't compare your situation, and you really have to just go, what do I need to be the healthiest version of myself? And I still struggle with all the, the tools that I have, but I think having something and being open to it. Because I think you don't really know until it happens to you. I didn't know. Like I've always been somebody that could go work out and feel happier. And when my doctor was like, "You need medication," I was like, "Oh, like this is bad. Like this, what I experienced was not an easy thing to go through. You know, I shouldn't be okay right now."
That's right. That's
So I think that's what yeah, I've just really kind of learned to embrace that it's okay to not be okay. And, you know, I love the baby that I lost, and I'm still wanting the baby that's not here. And that's a lot to hold.
It's so much to hold. And I mean, I think you just said it so perfectly, which is it's so okay not to be okay. We always say that the only way is through. We can't kind of go around it or over it or under it, but we just have to go through it. And it's so hard to do. So maybe physically we can go back to work or just resume right away with fertility treatments. But the question is, should we? Are we ready emotionally? Do we have the capacity? Also, we're just more than one thing as women. And remembering that yes, we're on this mission to family build, but we're also a person, like all these other things, right? It's so easy. I see women over and over just almost getting into machine mode, like next, next, next. And what's at stake is them. And not to stop the process, but just to figure out, to your point, how do I slow it down enough that I'm taking care of myself in it? And, not just through therapy, of course, but the other piece that you've really highlighted is all the social support you need. You just can't do this on your own.
No, and I think that's been one thing too, was where you're like, you're thinking about what the situation you're in and all the other aspects of your life, and you're trying not to be consumed by it because you don't want it to consume you and become everything, but it does, and even for me, I talked about my social platform and how it's really transitioned. I'm like, there's days where I'm like, are people just sick of me talking about fertility? Like, I'm sometimes annoyed but people are like, no, we want you to share about it. I'm like, so you want to see me do my shot again, or you want to, all this. But people are like, I didn't know what was involved in this process, and so there's so much importance to that and like honoring it. And I've found that. And also, like, how do I stay normal? How do I still, you know, go out to happy hour with my girlfriends, even if I have the restriction where you can't drink or you can't have a coffee with your friends, but can you grab a tea, or, you can't work out hard, but, grabbing walks, because there's a lot of, restrictions within the process. So you're like, how do you stay connected to your community? And I've taught my daughter a lot of it too, which I think has been really cool. Like, she's been in it with me and not trying to like scare her about it, because, she's 4. We haven't had like the birds to bees conversation, but she's learning a lot from me and being along with me, that hopefully one day she's not scared, of, how this process, can unfold for some people. She thinks babies come from taking shots, and I'm like, hopefully one day you don't need to take shots. You can just find somebody that you love and, do your thing. But,
But there's
it's
so many ways to make a baby, and you're showing her
ex-
one of them. It's amazing.
totally, like, she knows probably more about fertility than the average adult. But it's been like wonderful to like be open about that too with her, and, you know, raise soon to be, a woman one day that, I didn't know anything about infertility or fertility. I had a friend that did IVF probably 12 years ago, and I remember her talking about all the shots, and she was crying um, in her, oh, sorry, but she was crying in her bathtub because she was in so much, pain. And I was like, what is this thing that she's doing? Like, this sounds awful, and then she had twins through it. But that was the only person I knew that had done like infertility treatment. And then fast forward, however many years, and I'm like, wow, there's so many women doing this that don't talk about it. And even at my clinic where I go now, I've had people come up to me and say, I follow you on social. Like, my family and my friends don't know I'm doing this. Like, thank you for sharing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that just like breaks my heart, because I can see how much that is to keep, because you want to be excited, but it's so scary, and it's like people don't understand. Um, so yeah, it's such a layered experience all around.
How did you engage your support system, family, friends, to be the support? I mean, because we talk a lot in therapy that, not all your friends can show up the way you need them to, but it doesn't mean they're not good friends. It just means some people are meant to like go out for a happy hour or like have a dinner, and other friends are the people you call when you just need to cry or kind of unload. So how did you find a way to, because you have such a strong support system and you've really taken charge of that, how did you engage your family friend group to be what you needed them to be?
Yeah, I think it's such a valid point because, again, if you've never experienced it before, you just assume people are going to show up for you or know how to do the things. But this has been since 2022. So if I expected my friends to, be there for me every day and talk through every detail, that would be an exhausting friendship for them to have. So I have self awareness around that. But I will say that I have, like, some of my closest girlfriends are in a very different phase of their life where they have children and all of that and have never experienced IVF. And I think what I've had to do with them is just say to them, like, hey, when I'm like sharing this stuff with you, know that I'm a smart, educated woman who knows what's best for her. And I just really need love and support from you. Like, that's all I really need. Because people want to, share their opinions or share their thoughts, and it's not to hurt you. But what I learned is that when I was hearing those things from people, that even when they meant well, it was still making me feel bad about my choice to continue forward. So I think with like those people that maybe haven't experienced it, I've just really said, like, this is what I need from you. And they've done a really great job of doing that for me. And then I've also had friends who I've literally done my transfer the day after them, or, the day before. One of my friends who's 45 just got pregnant through donor eggs, and we had our transfer dates like within a day of each other. So we got to have those really like deep, meaningful conversations where like they can feel it. Another one of my friends is 30 plus weeks, and we did my first round of IVF together, and so we were really in it together. Another one of my friends had a second trimester miscarriage, so she's been a support to me when I need to talk about that. Like, I've really found my people in that way, because it is so much, and you want to have that closeness with everybody, but it's just not possible, just for self-preservation and also the understanding. If you've never had it happen before, I had a second trimester miscarriage. I didn't know what that felt like, and I felt bad for people, and I thought it was awful. But now it's like it's something you feel in your body, and it's just you need somebody in that way. So I've really found like people, different friends for different reasons. And my family has always been really supportive. I mean, they have not questioned my decision. I think they're more impressed with like how the fact that I'm like a pharmacist, a nurse, and all of that. And they're very inquisitive and they're very careful. They're like, are we asking too many questions? Or, but they've been really wonderful. So I haven't had to worry about that, where I know there are people that are more guarded with their families about, if it comes into values or religion or any of that. But so I feel blessed in that way. And even at work, I'm very open. I'm like, I mean, it's on social media, so it's really hard for me
But there's
to
no
hide
hiding it.
it. There's no hiding it. But I think telling people exactly what you need, there's nothing wrong with it. It feels a little weird at first, but like, hey, this is what I need from you. Or, after my miscarriage and when I wasn't working, I would go co-work with these women who were doing IVF that had these miscarriages, and I could sit there and cry or have a moment and just like not be alone. And then I still just go out with friends and don't talk about IVF too. Like, I'm going to a concert this week with my friends, and I'm just going to a concert, like nothing IVF related, So those nights are important too, because again, you do kind of get sick of talking about it because you're just like, you kind of start to feel like you have a disease after a while, and you're like, yeah, and you don't want to bore people, and you don't want them to be exhausted of you, and they're probably not, but you create these stories in your head because it's a long journey. So I would just say to people, just there are people out there that will meet you where you're at or have experienced what you've experienced. Like, I had this crazy, I went to the dentist, and this woman asked me, like, what's the rest of your day going to look like? And I was like, I'm actually starting IVF again today. I just like said it to her, and I said, I just had a loss, and I don't know why I decided to tell her, because my mouth was going to be open, and I'm like, the conversation, but she all of a sudden told me that 20 years ago she lost her daughter when like she birthed her daughter and then she lost her a month later. And we just had this moment of like connectivity, like at the dentist office. And I really didn't want to go do this appointment. And I've just found that when I share, there's always some kind of thread that it's with whether it's them or somebody they know in their life or a coworker, it always kind of comes up and it just makes you feel just a little bit less alone in it. And it gives you those little like pebbles to be like, okay, I can do this. That woman's okay. 20 years later, she's not sad and crying at work, you know? So I've just found a lot of like glimmers in that sharing as well.
I love that. I mean, I think also what you're saying about sharing at work and almost putting it out there. I mean, I think as women are in the corporate sector now, and now always we are in the corporate sector. And I think now that fertility is part of insurance and family leave and maternal health is really getting so much good highlight, not apologizing for being more than one thing as a professional woman, right? Saying, yes, I value my career and I value my job, but to do that, I'm also trying to be a parent. I'm trying to take care of my health and my mental health because that's all part of who I am as a really good professional. And I think the more I have these conversations, the more it's really the story of like what it means to be a woman today, which is so dynamic and incredible, but so dynamic and complex.
I know. I do. I'm like, even through all this hardship, I'm like, I love being a woman. I love that. I feel like my capacity has increased. Like, I'm doing my own butt shots, my progesterone shots, and I'm like, I was so scared of needles, and now I'm not. And I'm like, it's like the process has taught me that I can handle a lot, and I don't need to be broken by it. And I share because my story is important and it's going to be beautiful in its own way, however it turns out. And that's what I hope just future forward for these conversations to become less taboo so everybody can, really have a lot of like love and joy around their story. It was kind of like I had a C-section too. I feel like there's something like this in the C-section world where it's, the less than type of thing. But I'm always like, no, I'm like, that was such a badass thing I did. I'm like, I labored for 43 hours and then I, had to have this major surgery and I got through that. And so you just like, I don't know, if you can kind of train your brain to think about it differently and not be in like a victim kind of mode, like, why is this happening to me? I think I've really just tried to find purpose in it. Like, my body's not failing me. I'm a 40-year-old woman who has a lot of eggs, but the quality is not great. It's a numbers game. The data is crazy, but it's like I've learned so much about my body that I would have never known if I wouldn't have gone through this process.
Right.
And I've also helped a lot of my girlfriends and even, my mom, like, know about their bodies. Like, it's crazy how much we don't know about our bodies. I didn't know what AMH was. I didn't know what IUI or IVF even really stood for before I did it. I didn't, know all the inner workings of my uterus and my lining and, that it's a muscle and it contracts and then there's an inner, I mean, could go on and on. I'm like, wow, this is so cool that I've learned all of this. So I think that's also important is like, what positive can you take from such hardship? Because it would be really easy to be like, this is never going to happen for me. My body's failed me. I'm old, all the things.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm not that. I am. Like, I'm a dynamic human who has unknown secondary infertility. And that's also hard to have, like, the unknown. But
Right.
I can't also focus on that if I want to get a positive result.
Right. And I mean, in reproductive medicine, there's always a component of emerging science, which is so hard, right? It means that you could go to 3 different reproductive endocrinologists and you're not going to get this fully prescriptive perspective because the science is changing constantly. And so there is all that unknown and uncertainty that's almost part of the experience, which, makes it hard to hold and certainly is an anxiety provoker.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I'm like, surrender has been like my word. I feel like just like surrender to it all. But to your point, I did one cycle with one clinic and one with another. my protocols are completely different. And so I was like, what? Like, I'm like relearning. And then you also like forget things you've done, but it's like they're, and also the doctors are adjusting, as you're going to your appointments or as they're looking at your body. And so it's a very like fluid
Right.
experience. And even now with this transfer, I just said, I'm like, this is a completely different experience than all of my last, miscarriages, transfers. Like my body's in a different place. It's a completely different embryo. My uterus is different. Oh, I forgot to mention I started acupuncture for this one, which I did not do for so long because everybody talked about it, and I was like, I can't do another appointment. If I
Right.
have one
Or
more
another
appointment,
needle.
yeah, I was like, oh, more needles, fun. They're small. It's not too bad. But I've actually really loved it because I was ready this time, and I think it's given me a sense of calm. And also, I will say, if anybody's like me, I'm a very like I'm not a crunchy person, but I'm a very like I like energy and the universe and all that kind of thing. And with IVF, it's so medical, and you kind of get away from that like being in your body. So with acupuncture, I've really gotten to like focus on like how is my body actually feeling? Like what's going on in my mind? Where am I feeling things? Which has been really cool. And just like how do I get nutrients from good sources of food, and just I've learned so much in that from my acupuncturist on the other side of the medical Western world. So it's been a nice balance of both.
We love recommending acupuncture. If you can find an acupuncturist who specializes in fertility, there's a lot of efficacy. There's a lot of proof that it really helps the IVF process. And to your point, it helps you. It's good. It feels good. It connects you to your body, and it also just really relaxes you in times where cortisol can jump up constantly with stress. So it's like a thing you can do to take care of yourself, which is
Yes.
good.
Totally. And I think it's in my acupuncturist. She used to be a pediatric nurse, and so she has that, but then she's in, Chinese and Chinese and Japanese medicine. So she kind of has both sides,
Love that.
of that view, and just keeping the blood flow to the womb, and just, it's
Yeah.
helped me, I think, like receive more and stop like trying to like do the most,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the process. So I will say that people were recommending it to me like since 2022, and I was like, nope, nope, nope. And then I was like, you know what? I'm ready. I'm going to do this, and that's also important. You can't do everything. You
No.
can't. People are like, read it. It starts with the egg. Do this, do this, and I'm like, I already have a crazy morning protocol, and then I have to go to work, and then the nights I forget to take my meds, and I wake up at 2 in the morning. I'm like, I've ruined everything, and it's like
Right.
there's already so much. So I think it's so important too to just do what you can handle, and you're not going to mess it up or do something wrong. It's just additional
And
support.
that's right. And none of these things are going to like dramatically move a needle here. So your well-being is the most important. To your point, if it's not the right size, time, pace, then you shouldn't do it. And if you can handle it and it makes you feel better, then it's the right thing for you. And you know, because nothing is going to be a dramatic kind of impact. It's all just the small things that add up to make you feel good and connected and grounded and like you're doing something that you have agency over.
Exactly. We
Yeah,
need that agency.
so much. Um, as we as we finish our conversation, what would be a message you would want other women or couples or individuals to know or think about in the field of secondary infertility?
I would just say that what you want your family to look like is what your family should be. Makes me get really emotional actually, because it's like it's such an important part of your life. I mean, I'm somebody who values family, and most people that are doing this value family. That there is nothing wrong with finding a different alternative route. If you already have, a child, for me and my husband, we want her so badly to have a sibling. We want her to have a companion. This isn't a selfish thing that we're doing because we just want to have, another baby, we see our family as, as such, and that's what we want. And I don't think there should be any shame around that. People want a dog, they can get a dog, but it's like we want our second child to make our family feel complete. And I just hope that couples understand that that is okay, even if people don't understand it. And I will say also from a partner perspective, if you're in a heteronormative relationship, sometimes the man, I think I went through this too, is like, is my husband going to be like, can we just like stop? Like, I see everything you're going through. Like, are you okay? Like, he never said that, but I think they see us going through this hard thing and are like, when is enough?
Right.
And so I would say too, just like having a really like open dialogue. Like, I would say, I want to continue to do this. If you're like, you're on board with me, like, I'm just letting you know this has been really hard, but I still want to keep going, And then every day they're like, I'm done, I'm done. And he's like, okay. So knowing that it can change from day to day too, and what you want just because of the hormones and all of that, but just really being communicative about that, I think is so healthy because IVF, fertility, infertility, whatever road you're on, can be really hard on a relationship. It affects your intimacy, it affects how you function from your day to day. But I just know for my husband and I, like, we are so excited to give our daughter a sibling. And we're going to look back on this as something that we got through together. And it has not been easy, and couples therapy, get in it. Because it's amazing to be able to share your different lived experiences because they are completely different and know how to show up for one another. Um, and both people are valid in the way they feel. We've had so many different conversations about, we're very different humans, and it's like he's not wrong, I'm not wrong, but you have to find a way to come together through something that is so emotionally, financially, physically hard. And if you can go through it together, I think that's the best thing as a united front. Um, I have snot on my nose from
No,
crying.
I think
um,
being real is all we can be.
yeah, I mean, there's so many things. If I could sit down with couples that are going through this, there is so many things I could say, but I would just send them so much love and strength through this process, and find providers that are going to take care of you, who are going to support you and the goals you have. I have found that you need to find your people in your personal life and also in these clinics. Um, get a second opinion, go to multiple doctors, have the conversations. It's a lot of work up front, but then you can go through the process knowing that there's options, and that it is possible. Even if you do have unknowns, they will find a way. And if it's not this, then maybe it's surrogacy or maybe it's adoption. All these things have gone through my head too. We haven't gotten there yet, but knowing that it doesn't stop at IUI, it doesn't stop at IVF. There are other options too, that if you're okay with those, it can also build you the family that you want as well.
That's right. Liz, thank you so much. I think even from this conversation, I can't imagine how many women and couples and men need to hear that story and how much you're helping people just by sharing your own experiences, but also these universals that so many people are going through these same experiences and yet feel so alone. So to hear the power of your story and your experience and what's really helped you is profound. I really thank you.
Thank you. I love talking about it because I feel like such a pull to share and to help because we all deserve our families.
We all deserve our families.